Welcome to Forward with Truth. We're glad to have you with us again today, and I'm just here with Bernie Smyth from Precious Life. And Bernie has been involved in the pro-life movement from at least 1997, probably a wee bit before that to be fair, but she founded Precious Life. And Precious Life is the oldest Northern Irish pro-life organisation in Northern Ireland. And Bernie has been on the front lines, standing for the unborn and facing opposition at every turn. She has taken part in major pro-life initiatives, public campaigns and legal battles while remaining unwavering in her mission to see abortion ended in this country. So we're going to cover a lot in this conversation, including how Bernie got involved in the pro-life fight, the legal and reputational challenges she's faced, the Rally for Life and how it started and how it's grown, the changes in Northern Ireland's abortion laws, the impact of these laws on Northern Irish society. Bernie, thank you so much for joining us. We're really glad to have you again. And Bernie, we've known one another from I was at university. Mm-hmm. You know, so
was that 1999 or?
I wasn't that far back.
Right, okay. Sorry.
I know I might look at Bernie, but I'm not that old.
1 year to me is no different than another. I think it was quite a long time ago.
It would have been 2007, I think.
Right.
So 2007, and then we'd sort of started the pro-life movement and the pro-life society at Queen's, and Bernie was very, very helpful to us at that time, and you'd spoken quite a few times, didn't you?
Yeah. Thank you, Nathan, for having me on here today. It's my privilege always to have the opportunity to speak the truth and be a voice for those who have no voice. So I'm here today speaking for those little ones in the womb. And yeah, it was an amazing time when you were at Queen's. There was a lot of action took place. There was a lot of challenges, and things have changed now, I think, all these years later. So it was great to be involved with you at Queen's pro-life group at that time.
Well, it's good to have you on, and I think we'll just get straight in. So, thank you for joining us today. What led you into this fight? So, what was the you weren't always involved in the defence of life, and how did that start?
Well, I would say that this was a calling. I feel I was born for such a time as this. I was married, had 3 children at that particular time, and I didn't really know much about politics because I was busy parenting my children. I had a wee part-time job. I always worked in retail, fashion retail. And so I actually ended up at a conference in Dublin. It was a family and faith conference, not a pro-life conference. I think going back all those years, I always thought that the pro-life issue was a very secular type issue. It was political. I didn't really know much about politics because I never had the time to watch the news because you were always making dinner, looking after children. So I went to this conference, picked up some brochures, leaflets, and during an interval, a break from one of the talks, I opened the brochure and there was an image of an aborted baby. And that changed my life forever. Having 3 children myself, being pregnant, having ultrasound scans, giving birth and seeing the preciousness of life in your own children, and then looking at the destruction of a precious little baby. I was always one of those people that if I seen the starving children on the TV or going back whenever I was a school children, you helped support the black babies. I always had a draw to the vulnerable. I was brought up in a household that cared for the vulnerable. And seeing that picture, seeing that baby just transformed my life in a split second. I went from opening a brochure to completely losing time and thought. I was just in this zone of a heart-wrenching moment of how did this happen? What is this? Do I live in a world that does this to children? Is this what abortion is? So I think there and then I was listening to, and it was a friend of mine now, Reverend Pat Mahoney, who was in Ireland speaking about the abortion threat to the Republic of Ireland. And before I knew it, in the crowd of the people, he was saying, you know, I challenge you people to do something to stop abortion from coming in to Ireland. Well, I mean, I don't live in the Irish Republic, and I was like, oh my goodness, is this something that could happen here? So I left that conference, went home, showed the image, even, you know, sat down with my husband and friends of a prayer group, and shared my experience, and just knew that I had to do something. Didn't know what I could do. In fact, would have probably have said, Lord, can you find someone else, because I'm not educated enough, I don't have the time, this is a big major undertaking. And then I started to network with people, just question the politics surrounding abortion, and that was 1997. And at that particular time, under Tony Blair's leadership, the Labour government had voted 3 times to extend the Abortion Act to Northern Ireland. So I started to see there was a threat. I started to talk to people who were knowledgeable on this issue. Then I signed a form when I was in Dublin, from another pro-life group. I signed up a form for information. Yeah. They invited me to come to Dublin to a training, an information training day. And I remember when I opened the letter, there was the little baby feet was in the letter, you know, the 10-week baby, the pro-life symbol. And it was just like if, you know, I was on a new journey in my life. And thankfully my husband was very much with me in agreement that he felt the same as I did. So I went to that training day, and all of a sudden things started to change. I was really praying for the name of the organisation. And, you know, it was like one day I was on my knees praying and said, Lord, what do you want me to do? You know, and, you know, is this what you're calling me to? And I did open a scripture, and it was Rachel's crying for her children. And I really started to pray into that, and then there was a word popped out like precious something, and all of a sudden I was forming precious life just from seeing the image of an aborted baby. I have to say, 28 years later, I still have that strong pain in my heart that I can never be silent or sit back and do nothing while my baby brothers and sisters need a voice. And that's really, you know, I left my job. I had a part-time job in retail. I left my job with my husband's permission, in a sense that I would do something. And really, that was it. Started from nothing, image, to, like, when I look back now, I just know it was God's calling on my life. And you know, having the support and the agreement from your husband is a blessing, in my opinion, from God Himself, because I couldn't have done it, and I wouldn't be the miracles and the changes and the blessings that we have seen over the years have come from an agreement from a couple to give their life to this cause.
Yep.
You know.
And 28 years later, here you are.
I know.
You know, I'm sure it's been a bit of a whirlwind as well.
Yeah, I'd say a roller coaster.
Yeah.
You know, roller coaster, and many's the time I want the roller coaster to stop and let me off.
Yeah.
But many's the time the roller coaster stops and I'm through off.
Yeah.
You know, or many's the time I'll just like, can I just stop doing this? I don't want to do this more. I can't do this anymore. No. You know, there has been lots of moments like that. But again, I go back to, you know, that pain in your heart to think that if not me, then who? That, you know, I'm answerable to God for what we do for the little ones, and the most vulnerable and little ones in this world are babies in the womb.
Well, so I suppose it's maybe I was going to maybe ask this question later, but you know, one of the things that Precious Life would do is it would confront people with the horrible reality, visually, of abortion. And if some would say, well, I'm not sure, maybe there's another way, but why do you show that image?
Yeah.
Why?
And there is many ways. and I would fully endorse every way, and I'm involved in every way. But I knew that moment after looking at that image that I didn't know what abortion was, and I realised that the vast majority of people in 1997 didn't know what abortion was. So what I did was I thought I'll test it. So I remember going to a SPUC conference in London, because as I was networking, I was, researching, and there was an opportunity to get more involved with the SPUC. So I went to the conference in London, and you would not have believed it. Underneath one of the tables was a pile of posters of images of aborted babies. And I says to the guy, "Do you use these images?" And he said, "No." And I says, "Can I have them?" And he says, "Absolutely." So I had the material, and I thought, right, okay. And I thought, well, I need to spread this message that this is the horror of abortion. So we set up like display boards that my husband put together. We put the images on them, and we went out onto the street. We got a petition asking that, against the Labour government's plans, and went out into the Belfast City Centre, Cornmarket. And it was unbelievable, the response. Now, that same day was another group from Queen's that were testing the waters also. I had met with them, and they were considering taking up, a proactive public awareness campaign. But they were opposed to the images. Whereas I suppose you could say those who were involved with me or were supporting me, they had a different mindset. They said, no, we want to show the images. How can we show someone what an abortion was? And when I say I had seen ultrasounds of my own children, but seeing what abortion does to an innocent unborn child changes hearts and minds. So from that day onwards, we have had a street outreach, we call it street outreach, street session in Belfast City Centre. Now, the images that we show now are slightly less graphic, and I'd say graphic, but abortion is violence. It's violence towards the child. At that particular time, those images wore out, so we didn't have the same access to them. But that's what really, we were changing hearts and minds. It wasn't used as a shock tactic, because it was informing people, and people would say, but how could someone do this? This is abortion. We don't want this in our country. And you have to bear in mind, Northern Ireland held the line and still held the line right up until 2019. There was never a will for abortion. And I know from the people I talked to on the streets, the campaigns that I ran, the petitions that I collected all those years, various different types of campaigns. But talking about the images, how horrified are we as fathers and mothers and families and people about these images? I'm more horrified at what happens to that child in that image. And it would never be the intention, as a mother myself and now a grandmother, to disturb or take any other person's child's innocence, rob them from or forcing them to look at something. But we live in a society where everything is graphic, where buses could have ads on them, drink driving kills, body bags. Even the police themselves have used similar type images to create awareness for those things. Smoking kills. My children used to bring home pictures of lungs, blacked out lungs, and, so I don't feel that people are as horrified as we might think, but the horror inflicted on that child, to me, is far worse than someone opposing the showing of those images. So, I was arrested 3 times for showing the images, but I was fully aware of the legality, the laws, the English legislation that covered me. So it had to be challenged. So I did take that risk, and thankfully it never went the PPS throughout each time. So that then give the people of Northern Ireland, the people of UK, the legal right to show those images without the many complaints, the attacks that we used to come under, because most of the people who were against those images were obviously pro-abortion, lobby groups who would have come out and started screaming at you, I'm ringing the police because what you're doing. Well, if something's so disturbing to look at, then it's more disturbing to tolerate, in terms of that's what abortion is. So I feel if Ephesians 5 tells us to expose the deadly deeds carried out in silence, the deadly deeds that are covered up under rhetoric and arguments and, your body, your choice. It's not. It's an individual innocent little baby's body. So I'm really very much about showing the images and stand, in balance. Yeah. Like, our displays are very balanced. The development of the baby, fetal models, I like to balance it, and it's a balanced argument against abortion. But the images, why would we keep them hidden?
Well, I think it's interesting what you say, because I think part of it is we're happy to show our teens images of the Holocaust.
Yeah.
We have people going to Krakow and Auschwitz and other locations to see what heinous works were done. And yet we have before us the murder of millions more children. And I think what you're confronting the reality. I think images sometimes have a visual, they're uncomfortable. But it's that whole reminder, isn't it, that there's a human being, and it's a human being who's equally valuable and requires equal protection under law.
And you're right, Nathan, when you refer to the Holocaust, because I can always remember as a child, and there was black and white TV programmes when I was a child, and it was all, the films of the Holocaust, and the horror of watching what happened to Jewish people who also were classed as non-persons, who were dehumanised and treated as garbage, to me is very much akin to what we're seeing in the Holocaust, the silent Holocaust of abortion. And, many covered up the Holocaust. I mean, I've read many books on the Holocaust, I've watched movies, and I do think, Elie Wiesel is a Holocaust survivor, and he would say, he's said in many of his books and writings, to forget the dead is akin to killing them all over again. These children have been murdered through abortion, and the world needs to see the Holocaust that we face today just the same as we show the history of the Holocaust. So, I say I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry, because simply speaking, that's who we're fighting for. We're fighting to stop these children. And if I can save one child through exposing the horror of abortion, and I have done many a time on the street, people come back to say, I passed your stall one day, I saw your images, and my grandchild was considering an abortion. I picked one of your leaflets up and I showed it to them. Our leaflets also depict the images, and they didn't have an abortion. So it's just one of those things. Yeah. It's what we do.
Then you've sort of hinted at this as well, that you've faced opposition and legal challenges over the years, and I suppose the other thing as well is you've also faced reputational damage. People have come for you personally. I think somebody said you were the most cancelled woman in Ireland. So at one stage,
I would say you're probably right. I think I'm still cancelled.
I know, because I was on Twitter and I remember I followed Precious Life and I could see nothing because it was all blocked out.
I know.
But what? How do you keep going? What is the thing that keeps you going in those times?
Well, I agree. No one likes their reputation taken to the gutter, and mine has been. And I think if you had before 1997 had shown me, what would you call it, a recording, or fast forwarded me in to all these years of, attack and the undermining of who you are, and, being called a witch, just being misrepresented. No one likes that to happen, and I don't like it either, because I know that I'm a good person, and I really genuinely care. I care about women who are abortion vulnerable. I care for the children in the womb equally. So then to be portrayed as like a complete lunatic, for people to shout at you in the street, to people to call you bad names all the time, and to talk about you as if that you were like, and for my children to see that for me, that was worse. Coming after me, attacking me, and attacking my reputation through the media over the years has been pretty difficult to face. But I would wipe myself down and then realise, what is this about? It's not about you as a person. I'm just the person that's the voice. And sometimes I can say, it's not sometimes, I think I've come to the realisation, if they can dehumanise an unborn child, if they can rubbish that child, why would they not do it to someone who's representing that child? So we become vulnerable. Those of us who represent the most vulnerable children sometimes become like them.
Yeah.
And I realised that one day, you could say it was a profound moment of understanding of, if it's about you, are you in this for credibility? Are you in this because you want people to like you? Obviously you want people to like it. Nobody wants to be unliked. No one likes to be hated. But I know that people who know me and have known me over the years know that I'm misrepresented, and they know that how the media have portrayed me is not the real person. And you could be easily led to believe, as they say, a lie. You tell a lie often enough, people start to believe it.
Yeah.
When I read about myself sometimes, or I see how they depict me in images where it looks like you're being angry and you're a horrible person and you're harassing women and you're doing all this, ask the woman who I've helped, ask the people who I work with. But I'm past caring what people really think about me, because it's not about me. It's about the children that I represent, and they are. And also, obviously, if God has called me to this, I'm answerable to Him. So, who was the most hated person? The Lord Himself, who went and died on the cross. And you look at the crucifix and you think of what they did to Jesus, then you look at what they do to babies made in His image and likeness. Yeah. And if we were born during that time, like Peter, who denied Jesus 3 times, we don't know ourselves, but we do know that if we're followers of Christ, we're not going to be respected, loved or appreciated in this world. So it's maybe something I've just had to learn to live with.
Well, I think if they can call the holiest man who ever lived a demon,
that's right,
sure, they'll be able to find something in me.
I know. I don't know. I think I've become, what would you call it, I'm not...
Weathered.
I'm not bothered. Times I did find it, because times you want to say... But I'm not like that. Within you, something would want to scream out and say, but that's not really me. Like, I remember whenever I was a teenager growing up, I was always getting grounded, and I'll tell you what I got grounded for. And my mother never half the time believed me. If it wasn't picking a poor drunk off the street, if it wasn't calling an ambulance, if it wasn't rescuing a dog, if it wasn't doing something the way home and was late and got in home and got grounded for it because you're late the night again. No, Mummy, I was doing this. I always find that, there's consequences. Your consequences related to what you do. And I just feel that what I do is not about me. And thankfully, even my children are like, they all believe in what I do. And they say, but Mummy, people don't really know the real you. You should share more about the good work that you do in supporting, vulnerable women and so on. But you know what? It is what it is. And I just feel, well, do you know what? When I hold a baby that's been saved because I've either spoken, witnessed or helped their mother, that's when it's worth reputational damage my reputation's not.
Yeah.
I'm creating a reputation that I hope will be more, celebrated in heaven.
Well, I remember, it's funny, we took the young boys to see the St Patrick Centre, and St Patrick himself suffered a lot of reputational damage. Although the funny thing is, we only know about the reputational damage because of what he wrote down.
Yes.
Actually those things are gone, but now we look back on the things that he did and he achieved in his life, and I think there is a truth to that. I mean, like, at the end of the day, when we take a stand on this issue, look, we're on the right side of history.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time, because this evil will pass, and we're going to be fighting that.
Yeah.
So, the Rally for Life.
Yeah.
You'd been involved in 1997 forming Precious Life, and then one of the things you'd sort of you'd done was have a public mass demonstration in the Rally for Life. What was the origins of that? What was your inspiration for that?
Well, from 97, then we started to branch out over Ireland, all over. We joined forces in the south of Ireland, where we were fighting this, you could say, all Ireland battle, in a sense, where my work on the ground was Northern Ireland, but other groups in the south of Ireland. So we had come together to say, modelled on and with the inspiration of the March for Life in the United States, where every January, when Roe v. Wade was legal, they came together to march, and I think that was 50 years of marching. So we were very inspired. I'd been to Washington, and I was uniting with a few friends, a few pro-life colleagues from across Ireland. And so that was 2007, and we thought we'd come together to say we should have like a big pro-life gathering, and it was to alternate between Dublin and Belfast. So the plan was that we would work to support Dublin, and they would work Ireland, throughout Ireland would support Belfast. To create that real, to really rally the troops. I mean, it's all about rallying the troops, about bringing people together, being pro-life and proud, and working to keep abortion illegal and make it unthinkable. So we started in Dublin in 2007, launched the All Ireland Rally for Life, and then Belfast 2008. So that went on right up until 2018. So you could say, year by year, depending on what threat came from either Irish or UK government, tremendous, massive crowds come out, and then it started to build up. In 2013, there was a threat to change the law in the south. Between that and 2018, whenever abortion, the Constitution was repealed, and the repeal of the 8th Amendment took place, things changed dramatically in Ireland. Over 66% of the population voted to bring in the killing, the murder of unborn children. So there was a serious battle went on. There was major big events on, and I was involved in every one of them. But then, so we didn't know by 2019 what we were facing ourselves. We could never have anticipated that, and it wasn't that we were under any false illusion. We always knew there was always a threat to force abortion on Northern Ireland from the UK government, from Westminster. We thought we were safe enough, but there was always that challenge. There was a change in politics. I could say once upon a time we could have said that Stormont was the most pro-life government in Europe. Yeah. Now, sadly, we can say Stormont is probably one of the most pro-abortion governments in Europe. So there was a decision taken in 2018 because of the change in legislation that sadly the focus was mostly on Ireland. So Northern Ireland was sort of left behind, because the decision was that we weren't under the same threat. That has changed, as you well know, from 2019. And we probably feel we may have to really, start building up the manpower again, sending out a clear message. Rallies send out a very clear message to governments, to people, and to the media. About the views of the people. It gives people a platform. It's like I say, rally the troops from the platform, encourage pro-lifers to keep going, but also coming together to be a massive voice. Now, we've seen how things changed in Washington DC, and what happened then with, abortion changed in the United States because of Trump's involvement in the Roe v. Wade decision. He picked the right Supreme Court judges, but it took the people to lobby, to work, to march, to gather. We're like nearly going backwards. We are where the United States was 50 years ago here, and it's like we have to do it all over again. I mean, after 28 years of doing a lot of that stuff, people get weary, people are tired, people are no longer... It's hard to get people to roll their sleeves up and say, we have to fight this battle again. But the rallies are vital. Now, the rally continues on, and sadly, it's not sad because it's good. I shouldn't use the word sadly, but in Ireland, there's two big events. There's a March for Life takes place in May, and then there's a Rally for Life in July. That doesn't leave us much to work on because we all depend on one another to help to get these big events off the ground. They cost a lot of money, and they take a lot of effort to get people together, organising events. Sadly, at the minute, the Rally for Life in Northern Ireland, we had one, I think, 2 years ago. Probably the wrong time in March because the weather was wet, and so we're re-looking at keeping the momentum here in the north, and trying to get people rallied up again. People do say to me all the time, "Can we not have another rally in Belfast?" And we're looking at trying to bring together a group of people that might help to do that.
So tell me, for maybe people who haven't ever been to the rally before, is there any moment that you were at the rally and you just thought that there was a very powerful moment?
Yeah, I would say the rally that we held, and we called it March for Their Lives, but it was part of the Rally for Life in 2019. That was September. The night before, there was a big, massive voice for the unborn at Stormont. I mean, 20,000 people came out on the evening. That was the Friday evening, and then we had the event. I think that, to me, was significant. We had politicians coming out there as well. People were very, fired up, very... There was a challenge there. They were marching for something. They were rallying for something. They were there to be that strong voice, a united voice from across the divide. Throughout Northern Ireland, people were coming from different nationalities. People were united together. I could see there in the end, that to me was very significant when you looked from that platform. And whenever that march took off, and there was a gridlock at the City Hall because the police called me. I remember it so well because they were walking around the City Hall and back, and they were gridlocked. It was amazing. Yeah. So it was like that was a moment that will go down in history, and we have the photographic evidence, the videos there. But sadly, it wasn't acknowledged.
Those were the voice of those who resisted.
Yeah. I do believe that. And history will recall. And
I remember that time as well. It was almost that Facebook had went black. Yes. Because everybody was putting up saying darkest day, darkest day, darkest day. Yeah. And I suppose that moves us on to the implementation of the 2019 Act. Yeah. Because there's a lot of people may not know, why did this happen? Northern Ireland, was pro-life. Yeah. had a sitting assembly, still had a majority at that stage, just about. And then all of a sudden, abortion came in. Yeah. How did this happen? What's the story of how that happened for those who don't know?
Well, under a cloak of darkness, there was a lot of, what would you say, lobbying, meetings that were being held for probably a couple of years, where you had members of the Sinn Féin party, members of the SDLP alliance, all communicating, all working together in unison with members of the Westminster government. So there was a lot of collaboration going on there. I do believe that Sinn Féin, SDLP and members of the Alliance knew that they couldn't get it in through Stormont during that time. So they went to lobby Westminster, and unfortunately a decision was taken by the Westminster government, bearing in mind abortion was a devolved issue, one of the devolved issues, but unfortunately the Westminster government run roughshod over our democracy. I don't think that would have happened in any other country in the world. It was undemocratic. It was done during a very quiet period, just before, I think it was June, July, because I remember doing an interview on the 12th morning. Many politicians were off, many people were away, and all of a sudden a vote was taken. I was at Westminster that day. I went over to lobby. Was with Ian Paisley Jr. at that time. He was my MP, my representative. I don't think anybody ever thought it was going to happen.
No.
I don't think we were prepared for to live in a country that was pro-life one day and the next day, and then the threat that came from the government, because our Stormont was suspended during that time, giving us an ultimatum to go back into government by the 21st of October and form a government, or otherwise this law would be implemented, or it was passed. We could have stopped it. We could have stopped it. And that's where between September and in the run up to that, there was so much lobbying. I mean, people got behind, as never before. People got behind that. They got involved in that battle.
Yeah.
And SDLP were lobbied hard. It's working with the DUP and the TUV to try to form a government for one day. And that, if that government had have stood, which, as you know, that due to the Good Friday Agreement, any laws or any laws that a government has to have a majority, or has to work between, we have to have a combination of unionists and nationalists. So that's what they were trying to do. They thought the SDLP would have been the nationalists who would have came in, set up a speaker with the DUP and form a government, even for one day. Now it was legal to do so. I mean, I thought a lot of people, the likes of SDLP would have argued in their defence that this couldn't have happened, that this was a setup. But in reality, that right up until the last hour, everything was tried. We were there at Stormont that day as well. SDLP walked out. My words for that was they pulled the plug. Yeah. They pulled the plug, the life support machine on the future unborn babies of Northern Ireland. As you say, it was a dark day, but what do we do in times of tragedy? Do we just lie down to it? I mean, I certainly wasn't for lying down. That next morning, we got up, we went and we protested outside the SDLP's offices. We protested outside the Sinn Féin offices that we had been doing for a long time to expose them in their community. But it was too late. It was too late. We were given an ultimatum. They said that they couldn't form a government without Sinn Féin. It was, they said that was undemocratic. But the reality of it was, those in SDLP were behind the scenes working with Westminster to bring in abortion, so they didn't care.
Well, it's quite ironic, isn't it? Because you've got nationalist politicians that are saying, "Oh no, we don't even sit in Westminster."
No, we won't take
But then behind the scenes, they're collaborating to kill what they would call, to kill the children that they would say are Irish. So it's the whole thing is full of hypocrisy. Yeah. But I think one of the things it says, Bernie, is I think there's a couple of things there that this was brought in. I think, if I can recall correctly, it was brought in 2019. Yeah. The Executive Formations Act, wasn't it?
Act. Yeah, it was a mundane bill that they were debating. It was about budgets, but they included it in. And
normally those bills are never. They're just put through. Yeah. And then something happened. The Speaker got involved, didn't he?
Yes, the Speaker got involved at that time as well, and he gave permission for that bill to be rushed in that day,
which never happened before.
No. It was like if all the cards were set up.
Yes.
Everything was set in place.
Yeah.
It was well orchestrated. But I don't believe that abortion would have ever got into Northern Ireland any other way. I really, truly believe that, because, I mean, I know that from the petitions that I have collected on the streets, the lobby campaigns that I've held, events. There was no will from the people, and there was no strong will from the government. But it was like when that happened at Westminster, it was like they were given a taste of power that they, the argument was from Sinn Féin, no Brits will tell us Irish what to do, so as the Brits out. But then they brought I'm using this as a Sinn Féin, they brought the Brits in to destroy the Irish children that they claim, and the Irish people they claim to represent. So, I mean, it was sheer hypocrisy to think that by Mary Lou MacDonald and Michelle O'Neill, when they stood at Dublin Castle in 2018 and said the North is next.
Yeah.
They made a clear declaration, and they pronounced, and we didn't underestimate that. We held a rally for life at Stormont that July. We moved it from the city centre to Stormont. But it was like, it was imposed on us undemocratically. But it was orchestrated, and it was like we were left like the poor cousins. You just take what we were treated. Northern Ireland was treated poorly, undemocratically. But shockingly, when we were asked to give our say and the opportunity, 79% of the people, the vast majority, 79% of those who responded to the Westminster government's consultation opposed any change to the law. But we were still...
So 79% of all people.
Yeah.
And this was one of the largest consultations ever. It was 20,000 people?
Yeah, it was over 21,000 submissions were made from, and many of those represented groups. So it was 21,000, 79% of the people of those involved in that consultation opposed any change to the law.
And yet it was still... It was still ran through. Yeah. And I think for those as well who are maybe listening in from an American context, or they don't understand how the UK Constitution works. In America, the Constitution document is the sovereign bit in a sense.
Yes.
It is, whereas the UK Constitution is set up in such a way where Parliament itself has sovereignty, and whatever Parliament wills, it can do. So, despite Northern Ireland having a devolved assembly, it can always be overridden by Westminster.
Yes.
So, as a result of that, then, is it not true then that we should be thinking, how do we, if we're going to overturn this problem, we have to go back to where it started, Parliament itself.
Yeah, I know.
Because I think, and I know you you were one of the ones that sort of you and Spock and a few other groups came and Abolish Abortion came together to say, right, we want to repeal, because I think that's really the only way back, isn't it?
It is the only way back, but we have to also not just repeal the legislation, we have to introduce personhood legislation. Now that's something that I know some of my colleagues in the United States are trying to do, because even though Roe v. Wade is gone, every state has a constitutional right to enact and vote in their own laws. If even in the United States, even in the UK, or throughout the different governments in Scotland and all, if we were to work on personhood legislation that acknowledges the unborn child in the womb from the moment of conception to be a person. If you remember, the 1861 Offences Against the Person Act did acknowledge the unborn child was a person, and there was only exceptions to abortion in very, very limited circumstances if the mother's life was at risk. But because medical science was so far advanced, it was very rarely that a direct intentional abortion was ever needed. That's why Northern Ireland and the south of Ireland was the safest place in the world to be pregnant, because when you protect a baby in the womb, then a mother's life is safe, because you're protecting two people, two persons. So I'm not so sure whether the 1861 would be what we'd want to go back to, because we're so advanced here. But it would be to get together as a movement to establish some sort of personhood, establish personhood status to every single child created at the moment of conception, fertilization.
Yeah, you see, that's interesting, because I think that is ultimately where it has to go, because once we establish this child in the womb is a human, deserving of equal human rights to those who are born, that is the way back. And it has to be, look, we can ram something through the assembly. It's not that easy, to be honest with you, because with petitions of concern. But it has to be, because this was brought in primary legislation through Westminster, it would seem Westminster's the only way, isn't it?
I know. I believe, like, I suppose when you think back to the battle for slavery, the battle to abolish slavery, we had Wilberforce. We really need a Wilberforce politician in Northern Ireland or in Westminster, someone who will, run with personhood, a personhood petition, someone that'll, rattle the cages of those who think abortion is okay up to the moment of birth. And we know that Wilberforce didn't realise, he tried up until I think it was a few days before he died that he abolished slavery. But I think we need to get that person. We need to get a group of really strong, vibrant, passionate politicians who would start a personhood, battle, a crusade. But it is the only way back.
Well, I disagree. No, I'm going to disagree.
Do you? Go ahead,
I'll tell you why.
All right.
I think it's not about... I think when you look at the history of there's I've been chatting to a good friend of mine about this. We've looked at this, and when you look at the history of the end of the slave trade, it is not true that Wilberforce ended the slave trade.
Okay.
Right? It was the church.
Good.
The church did it. Long before Wilberforce, there were churches that were sending in petitions into Parliament just of their own bat. There's no existing petition of the slave trade from Wilberforce.
Right.
But they did a wee bit of an investigation. This is an amazing story. They did a bit of an investigation into, could they find something from that, And they managed to find this petition.
Right.
28 names, one small chapel, right? One small Methodist, I think it was Methodist or Methodist chapel, and they had written their names. And they had submitted that in the early part of the 1700s, saying that they wanted to see slavery abolished.
Right.
There was a movement that was already ongoing from within the church.
Yeah.
Then what happened was Wilberforce had a conversion experience.
Yeah. Yep.
He felt called into ministry, wasn't sure. Newton told him to stay in, and then he organised it.
Love it. I love it. Thank you so much, because you've really informed me today. So really what you're saying is the charge has to come from the church first. And then we need, I'm 100% with you on that. I agree with you. And, you know, it's like we need to find a way. We're all trying to do it. Like, you know, I'm like, roll your sleeves up, just do it. Try and save one life at a time. But there has to be a bigger plan to, you know, I would hope and pray that in our lifetime, who knows, we could see abortion ended. We could see personhood, you know, status given to every individual human being. But we're the little people here. There's bigger people.
We're the
there.
28.
Yeah, we're the 28. But that's great. You know, I'm really going to read into that. You've really given me a new sort of this is how you do it.
Yeah, it was fascinating because me and a friend of mine, you'll know who it is, but we had a chat about this and you know what way. But I think look, the problem started in Westminster. It has to. We have to go back there.
I know.
But the thing is, I love the Wilberforce approach because it is based on petition. Yeah. It is not based on violence. It is not based on force. It is based on, and in a sense, it is doing what the church is meant to do. Yeah. Be that moral conscience to the state authority, and it's a very peaceful way to do it. You know, but I don't know. I think there's
that could be the foundation of a new movement.
Yeah, I think so.
I do think so, because like we're all willing to do what we have to do to try to save lives, but we can, you know, we're just the small people there saving one life at a time, educating, informing people of this horror. But you know, we are at a loss on how to ultimately change. We've got ideas, but we need to implement something that could potentially be the answer to the problem.
And when you think about it, one little church, 28 people, 300 years later, their testament is still there, isn't it? Yeah, it's not amazing. It's still amazing. Testifying to the humanity of the slave, the slaves in Westminster even to this day. It's amazing.
It is amazing. There we go. So,
but talking about that, we've got a shocking. Since then, we've had this shocking reality. We were talking about this earlier, Bernie. Yeah. How many abortions is it? How many kids have faced?
Well, we're coming up towards the 31st of March, which we recognise as one of the anniversaries because the regulations were introduced there in 2020. So the figures can be very confusing here, but estimated the last October we did a baby shoe display of the numbers, and it was over 8,000 babies have been murdered here since 2020. Now, we had recent figures released by one of their politicians, Timothy Gasson of TV, and he asked the question, and there has been an increase from 2020 up until now of 77%. When I think back to before 2019, year on year, the figures for women even travelling to Northern Ireland at one point were decreasing. We had very, very insignificant figures. That's not saying one abortion is one too many, but our figures were very, very low. I mean, I've been involved in supporting women with difficult pregnancies for years. I've been outside abortion facilities before abortion was legal, reaching out to women, helping save so many lives. So there wasn't what you would say a massive demand. Even the argument, well, women are still travelling to England. Well, let's try and support those women, and that's what we have been trying to do. But those figures were going down. Once abortion becomes legal, then a woman out there in a crisis pregnancy is not necessarily going to go for support from pro-life organisations because abortion's legal. I can get rid of this problem. That was never the mentality. That wasn't the culture we lived in years ago. So now what we're actually seeing is an increase of women seeking abortions, and then the argument or the example of that would be the easy availability to abortion pills, where it's not a surgical abortion, it's not a woman being hospitalised, it's taking pills. We know that we could have another discussion on that at another time, of the effects that abortion has on women, and what we're actually seeing is so many women's lives destroyed through these pills by post that is legal in the UK. But here a woman can have an abortion very easily by going to an abortion facility and taking one pill there and taking the other pill at home. So it's far easier now than what it was years ago.
Because it's totally decriminalised, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, well, as I say, abortion's legal in all circumstances. There's no excuse needed.
See, people. I don't think people understand the extremity of this law. It is just a free for all.
It is.
And the legislation didn't just that legislation that was brought in.
Yeah.
And it was. And what I want to say to people as well, this wasn't just This was an amendment that was well thought out. It was, and it included more than abortion, didn't it?
Yeah.
So what were some of the other things? There was schools are now required to promote abortion as part of their curriculum under the relationship sexuality education. Was that brought in?
That was under the Section 9 of the Northern Ireland Formation Bill. It was brought in as well. So schools now are more or less forced. I mean, I think that challenge is very much should be taken up by the Catholic Church in particular, because they do have an ethos. They have a Christian ethos. I know there are a lot of state schools here in Northern Ireland, and I'm not so sure whether there's a lot of Christian schools, but I know a Catholic school in particular would have to operate under the Catholic ethos, and that wouldn't include teaching about abortion being a right or about abortion referrals. I mean, there's so much in that was forced in on Northern Ireland. Extreme sex education without a parent's consent. I mean, I've been involved in that battle as a parent myself for years, and now a grandparent as well, on the destruction of our children's innocence. A Christian family that doesn't need an 11-year-old or even a child in primary 1 and primary 2 to be taught and for their innocence to be robbed through sexualization. I mean, it's an assault on a child's innocence. So there's so much more involved in what was forced on Northern Ireland, that a new movement has arisen out of this battle to change the RSE education within the schools. And I think, I'm not sure if any of it's been halted, but it's been challenged. There was a few court battles to be taken up, but because this bill is seen to be a piece of legislation that no one can chip away at, because it's foolproof. It's like, even though it was undemocratically forced on us, there's very little leeway to challenge this formation bill, Section 9 of this formation bill. I think it's Section 9.
Yeah, that's right.
Section 9 of this Northern Ireland formation bill. But it's more than just, yes. Ultimately, we know if you sexualise a child, then you're robbing that child of his innocence. Then when that child matures, then you can destroy that child further by introducing, early sex education that will sexualise the child into becoming sexually active, into becoming for that child then to end up being pregnant and then abort that child. It's a whole system. It's like a whole battle on the sacredness of the human person and the innocence of the child. So I'm not sure where that battle has went to at this point in time. I did have meetings with some Catholic representatives. I'm not sure where we're at with it now.
Well, I think where it is at the minute is that you have a situation where it is now the law.
Yeah.
That every state-funded school, right, independent schools, they don't have that regime.
Yeah.
But every state-funded school has to teach and they have a specific wording from CEDAW.
Yeah.
Because it was imposed. By the way, folks, Northern Ireland is actually not.
Yeah.
The law is not coming from Northern Ireland, it is coming from a section of a UN subcommittee.
Yeah. Who are a Quango unelected.
100%.
And then go into countries to force them, like what they did. It was the CEDAW recommendations that were made to the UK government that Northern Ireland was in breach of UN recommendations on the so-called right to abortion, where we know there's no right to abortion. And CEDAW also wants to implement full-blown sex education right through the formation of a child's life. So really undermining the parents who should have the ultimate right to what education. I mean, in the Catholic Church, it's very...
The parents can't even remove their kids from this.
No, I was able to do that with my children years ago based on the guidance of a document that every Catholic parent should know about, that we are the ultimate educators of our children, and therefore after who then we guide or we give permission. So I, as a mother, did never give permission for my children to be given sex education unless I give permission. And I asked, could I see the sex education that was given to the schools? And when they were unable to show me that, then I withheld my children from sex education lessons. But that's not the case now, and I think that's where the challenge lies.
And what's amazing is the Alliance Party are saying this isn't hard enough.
Yes.
And parents shouldn't have a right to withdraw their kids from this stuff.
Well, then who owns your child?
Well, they obviously believe that they're more... They know better than the parent.
No.
But that is what has been said.
Yeah.
So I suppose, that was brought in. But there was also another thing that was brought in, and again, it's sort of come to the light. So we as part of these provisions, it was the whole issue of obviously promotion and finance to the abortion stuff. But there was also a section, wasn't there, about buffer zones?
Yeah.
Now, there's obviously, we're not going to get into the details of an ongoing case.
Yes.
Because there is a high-profile case of Pastor Clive Johnson.
Yeah.
And, look, we're not going to look into a specific case. But just to say that it is fascinating because Pastor Johnson was arrested and he, as far as I'm aware, he didn't mention abortion.
No.
So what we're saying is that the legislation is written in such a way where it is much wider than
reaching out to an abortion vulnerable woman, influencing her so-called choice or her so-called harassment. I mean, I've been active outside abortion facilities, abortion referrals for over 20 years. There has never been one case where, and I think that was clearly identified through the PSNI for Northern Ireland, during their intervention at that time when Claire Bailey was putting forward the legislation, that there was no evidence that any women were being harassed, intimidated, that there was no cases where staff were being harassed or intimidated. So there had no evidence.
In fact, it was fictitious evidence, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There was something like that. That's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And then that was exposed, that this was made up nonsense, that there was no such thing. I think that came from, was it somebody at Justice Department in Stormont? Someone gave a report, but it was the report was untrue, and then the PSNI backed that up. So there was no need for this legislation. No. And as I say, for someone like me who was committed to going to where babies were threatened by abortion, or where women were being referred for abortion, and saving so many lives there for years and years and years, to be told you can't go there anymore, you will be a criminal, you will be fined up to £2,000 plus more if you go within the boundaries of this area, or if you try to change impact the conscience of anybody, or even to pray. Well, and as we know, that case where you even praying in your head, or in Scotland the argument is if you pray in your home against abortion, you could be committing a crime. Well,
the law is written in such an ambiguous way that invariably this will be it is being tested in court, because it's so vague. Now, some would say that it was written deliberately vague, so it could then be used by law enforcement
to stop
to
prayer,
quash protest, prayer, whatever. But regardless of the intent, I don't think the police are. I want to be clear: the police and the PPS are, caught like in between a rock and a hard place. They are forced to enforce, but the legislation itself is folly. And I think that this is what is revealing. So, do you believe that this is an example of where religious expression in Northern Ireland is under threat?
Absolutely.
And not just religious, but just generally?
Absolutely. Well, we know what happened. We're still waiting for the outcome of the Belfast City Council's consultation on whether or not street preachers, pro-life campaigners can impart their message on society in the city centre. So this is a direct assault on religious freedoms, on your democratic right to freedom of assembly. But ultimately, it was clearly outlined in one of the debates during the time of the repeal, or not the repeal, the investigation by the Attorney General went to the Supreme Court. Attorney General for Northern Ireland was challenging a certain clause within this legislation, and one of the QCs, one of the legal advisors or legal representatives who were arguing the case for that it wasn't undermining the religious freedoms and it wasn't in breach of our right to freedom of assembly, said that prayer was a weapon. That they weren't even concerned with people like, for example, me reaching out and giving a leaflet. They argued that prayer was as big a weapon outside abortion facilities areas, and that was made public, because I remember writing that statement down. So they understand the power of prayer, the power of quoting scripture. So it was very clear that they are more concerned about someone praying or someone's assembling to in an open air gathering to preach the gospel of Christ. They are ultimately out to stop. So it's like the sign of the times that we're living in. And when I was there, we always had prayer warriors there, silently praying, quietly praying. There was a mixture bunch, others holding signs with scripture. It was so hated. It was, this is our space, get out of it.
So it's amazing, isn't it, that right, this is not a human made image of God, because God doesn't exist. Right? That's the argument, isn't it? Right? But somehow prayer's a weapon.
Don't tell us,
So how is prayer a weapon
if it doesn't matter?
So now it reveals fundamentally, as you're saying, they know what the power is of prayer. But it's interesting that even you'd mentioned their Belfast City Council.
Yeah.
Because actually, the buffer zone legislation, which that is dealing with, Belfast City Council are saying that you have to have a speech permit.
Yeah.
So we could refuse your right to speak because you have to come to some stupid committee in the council.
You have to go before a committee as to what are you going to be speaking about?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to be preaching the gospel here. I'm going to be, talking about, abortion.
Yeah.
And you have to ask their permission as to whether you can set up a stall or speak about it on the street.
I don't think I would trust a councillor to, make a decision on whether or not I can speak. Because guess what? When we're making... the whole purpose of freedom of speech is to actually say to those in power, we don't agree with you.
Yeah.
We don't consent. We dissent. And if those people are able to permit you to speak, that's where it goes.
I think that we are living in those days. I'd be very interested in the outcome of that consultation, because I know it was very, very favourable to upholding our freedom of speech.
Well, the beauty of it was the consultation. First of all, I think it's unlawful.
Yeah.
Because the idea that a council through a bylaw can override, either the Equality Act, the Discrimination Act, or anything to do with human rights. But I think the other thing with that, Bernie, is it was ridiculous anyway, because the unions were against this. Yeah. They thought it was a bad idea. People before profit thought it was a bad idea. Yeah. The DUP thought it was a bad idea. And
others were coming around.
And even Sinn Féin were saying we're not really on board with it.
Yeah.
It just seemed to be the Alliance Party and the Greens and SDLP and a few radicals were sort of saying, we thought this was a good idea, but it's just insanity.
It doesn't seem to be. I mean, we should have heard the outcome by now. I know it's been on my mind to follow that up, but that again is something. I think there's a real challenge and a real battle, and I think the case that you referred to today is going to be a very interesting and a very challenging case for the future. Yeah. Freedom to express your religion in the public square, or your faith. Yeah. Especially, abortion wasn't mentioned. It wasn't a protest. It was a religious gathering. On a Sunday afternoon, as far as I know, wasn't it?
Yeah, I wasn't there, but
I think it was a Sunday afternoon. So it was a Sunday afternoon gathering of people, and it wasn't. They couldn't have influenced anyone there that day because it was a Sunday afternoon, and so he wasn't there to influence. He wasn't there to protest. He wasn't there. He was there to preach the gospel.
Well, that would certainly be what would be perceived to be the intent. Yeah. I mean, there's no indication from any of the publicly available stuff.
Otherwise,
but I mean, ultimately that's going to be down to a court to decide. Yeah. And I don't want to influence anything from a court perspective, but I think we'll just see what happens. Yeah. But it is going to be significant, I think, in terms of deciding a lot of things. But I mean, in the context of the Vice President of the United States saying Europe has a free speech problem, and that to happen the day after, I tell you.
I know.
It was amazing.
Yeah. Well, I do think we're living in very interesting and very trying times, and who knows what the future will hold, but we all have to be united together as God's people, and do what we can do in the area that we're involved in, whether church circles, public squares, but support those cases in the hope that this terrible, terrible unjust law will be exposed and challenged in some way.
Well, I think we'll bring it to that. That's a good thing to sort of bring this to an end. But for those listening, Bernie, on how to get involved, what would you say to them? How can they help? Can one person just do something?
Yeah, one person. All of us live in different communities. We have got different circle of friends. We live in, many of us are in different from different church backgrounds. There's many ways, to lobby your politicians to keep bringing this issue to the forefront of I know that I mean, I lobby my politicians all the time. There is also ways of supporting pregnancy care centres. I very much would get behind the Stanton Healthcare Centre in Belfast by supporting or donating to them, or even calling them and asking them, can you volunteer? Is there something you can do? Or for a coffee morning, Precious Life are out every Saturday. I mean, I'm out this weekend in Cornmarket just talking to the people, collecting petitions and just raising awareness. There's many ways. Come as a pro-life speaker, write to the newspapers, just keep it out. I mean, we have a motto, our media is the streets. Mm-hmm. So we have to bypass, as you said, I'm a well and truly cancelled person in society, but who cares, because I'm bypassing the media by going directly to people and talking to them about abortion. So talk about it, make it an issue. Use social media. I mean, social media is an amazing platform. I know a lot of young people who have been cancelled on social media, because what happens if you speak out about this issue here, all of a sudden you're bombarded, trolls come out of everywhere.
Checks.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Yeah, exactly. But, you know, keep being a voice, keep standing up for those who have no voice. And I know that that's one thing you can do, is even like young people, invite Precious Life into your schools. Mm-hmm. Since lockdown and after 2020, I have not spoken in one school. And we have an amazing Life is Precious. You can train up to become a presenter in schools. We have an amazing schools program. We can try and get back into the schools. Sometimes I just feel there needs to be about 10 of me, because there's so much to do. I get frustrated with the amount of work that has to be done, but one person can make a difference. I was that one person once upon a time, mm-hmm. and I decided to do something. And as Wilberforce said, once you know, you can't not know.
Yeah.
Well, that's not his full quote, but more or less, when you know that abortion is wrong, you can do something.
Yeah.
You know, or contact pro-life organisations and ask them how you can help.
Yeah, that's a good point. So how can people get in contact with Precious Life?
Well, they can, we're on Facebook, we're on all platforms, social media, we have a website, we have an email. You can email info@preciouslife.com. You can give us a call on 02890 278484. You can contact me personally. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, X, Instagram, all those pages we're all on. We're even on TikTok. Oh. TikTok seems to be the way forward.
It does seem to be, doesn't
it? Now, I'm not a fan of it. I think it's a bit of a crazy platform.
Yeah.
But you know, you absolutely can get your message across there, and that's a new area. Share all our videos. We have an amazing social media gal, Kathy, who's amazing. She makes great reels. Share all our stuff. It's all very, very good. Pro woman, pro baby, pro both. Let's see if you see if an unborn child, as Schindler said, you can save the whole world entire. So, you know, you can save a life even on social media.
That's right. Well, look, thank you so much, Bernie. Thanks for taking the time to share your story and your insights today. We've covered so much today, from your journey into pro-life movement to the major battles over abortion in Northern Ireland, and we've talked about how the law was changed without public consent, the rise of abortion numbers, and the serious impact on schools and young people. And we've explored the fight for free speech and the implementation of buffer zones and the pushback against pro-life advocacy. So thank you so much, Bernie. We really appreciate having you today.
You're very welcome. And I will end by saying, you know, we will win, because ultimately we have a great saviour that cares more about those babies than we do, and we're just the instrument. So we just say, you know, God can bring this victory about in a split second. Well, so we'll just keep believing and keep trusting that one day we will see abortion.
Well, Christ is King, isn't he?
Yeah, amen.
Christ is King. And so, you know, I think that's a brilliant way to just sign off. And to all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And until next time, keep advancing Christ's kingdom in every domain and moving forward with truth. Thank you.